You're listening to the 95 Podcast from the team at 95 Network, where we host conversations specifically designed to support leaders in small and mid-sized churches.
Hey everyone, this is Dale Sellers, Executive Director at 95 Network, and welcome to the 95 Podcast. I hope you've had a good summer. As we record this, we're kind of getting close to the end of the summer. Kids have started back to school, and typically this is a busy time in the life of a church. I think, everybody kind of does a reset after you have gone through the summer. Hopefully, as a leader, you took a vacation this year. One of the scary things that came out of the pandemic was discovering that for a couple of years, a lot of pastors never took a Sunday off. And that is just not good. That's not healthy. And honestly, it's not leadership. If you have to be there every week, brother or sister, then we got a problem. Our job is to equip and raise up leaders. Which kind of is a lead in today to our guest today. I am so honored to have with me today BJ Rutledge. He is from Paradise, Texas. I didn't know if all of you knew that there was such a place, but I've been there, and it's a wonderful place in Texas. And he's going to talk to us today a little bit about his life and specifically a book he's written. But before we do that, we just want to catch up a few minutes with BJ. BJ, how you doing today?
Man, I am doing great, and it is exciting to be a part of this podcast. So good to see you. Good to talk to you again.
BJ was one of the original board members of 95 Network when I began to lead. He joined with us. He has such a passion for the small church and really helped us through the transition. In fact, I just celebrated my 5th year as the leader of 95 Network and now into my 6th year. And BJ was a huge support in that process and an encourager, and just having someone of his caliber who believes in you and who gets your back, it just means a lot. And so we stayed in touch for a while, and then we were just discussing the last conversation we had a few years ago was we were going to get together in Texas, and talk about writing a book together, and then we never talked again. And since then, I've written a book, and you've written a book.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
So we were on point. Almost. With that plan, So take a few minutes and kind of catch us up a little bit and tell us who BJ is and where your life is. And then we're going to discuss your book in a moment, but just kind of give us a little background on BJ.
I grew up in a good home, had good parents. One thing that was very interesting about me, as opposed to a lot of people, my dad was a believer. He was a Christian, but my mom wasn't. And which is kind of unusual, but yet she was teaching Sunday school in the church that we attended. So I was taken to church as a kid. I went to church and I got that foundation. But when I got into high school, it was very rebellious, a lot of immorality. I got into alcohol, which led to drugs. Actually ended up being arrested and busted for possession of weed. It was a felony bust back during those days.
It sounds like it was a lot of weed.
It was a lot of weed.
If it was a felony, it was a lot.
But it's something that never went to trial, so I don't have that record. Mm-hmm. But I was running from God as hard as I could. And I really found out in the world as I got out on my own. I had an apartment with a friend, partying and doing all that kind of crazy stuff, that the people that I thought were my friends really weren't. Yeah. I mean, when push came to shove, if it meant them getting in a little bit of trouble or me getting in a lot of trouble for something, they would always look out for number one. Mm-hmm. And I just began to recognize they didn't really, we had a fun time together. They didn't care that much about me. Mm-hmm. The only place I could remember where people seemed to care with no strings attached, which shocked me, was at church, the church that I grew up in. And so I decided to go back. And this absolute truth, I snuck in. I was so afraid to go back.
Really?
Because I was afraid like the walls would cave in,
Sure.
The roof would fall in. And I did that actually for 5 weeks in a row. In fact, what's a really funny story is on the weekend of the 5th Sunday that I was going back, there was a group of girls that would hang out at our apartment all weekend and the parties and stuff. And I saw them on Friday afternoon late because party was fixing to start. And they just kind of said, "Man, we haven't seen you in weeks. Where have you been?" And I was so tired of, just the junk in my life that I thought, I'm just going to tell them the truth. I don't care if they laugh or not.
Yeah.
So I said, "Actually, I've been going to church." And it was funny because their response was, well, can we go with you? And I said, no. I mean, if they went with me, the roof would cave in.
Yeah, the whole place would just burst into flames.
Yeah. Actually, I told him that's fine if you want to, but it was that Sunday where God really got a hold of my heart. I made a decision to trust and follow Jesus, and it has been an amazing adventure ever since. What's interesting is 1 month later, there was a revival at our church, and I was there. I was a new believer and all excited, and my mom got saved.
Oh,
and,
that's so cool.
Yeah,
That's
it was
so
amazing.
cool.
As I was talking to her about it, I'm going like, what's up? I thought, she said, yeah, I've been teaching Sunday school, doing all this stuff for years, but there was always one thing missing, and that was Jesus. And so I got to see that, which was really cool. A year later, in a time alone with God, using Luke 5:27 and 28, which was the call of Levi or Matthew, God called me to ministry. And it's been an incredible journey, just serving him in various churches. And eventually ending up in paradise where I never would have thought I would be.
We all want to get to paradise, but you've been there for a long time.
Yeah, everybody wants to go to paradise. But after I finished seminary, I served predominantly like in large churches, what people would have called back then mega churches, and had great ministry. I was a youth pastor, student pastor for a number of years, and had a phenomenal student ministry in Bossier City, Louisiana. Then I was in Houston as a singles pastor for about 5 years. And then actually I helped a startup church in South Houston after that. And that was 5 years of learning and being humbled. And I got to the point where I felt like we just weren't getting anywhere. It was either my inability to lead, or people just didn't really want to go with the vision we said we'd go with. And I just remember praying, God, I don't know what to do. I just don't think this is, it's not happening. I really felt pretty much like a failure there, because we just, we couldn't break a 200 barrier. There were people all around us that were lost, and we were seeing people saved and baptized, but it was kind of a difficult time. And at that time, I began considering the option of maybe I don't need to be the lead guy. Maybe I need to be a guy that's on a staff that really supports a pastor. And I got a call from a friend named Kerry Shook, who's a pastor at Fellowship at the Woodlands at the time, and said, hey, I really need you to come help us. And so we began to pray about that and really felt God leading to that. So we went there, but I left that startup feeling very much like a failure. And God used the nearly 4 years at Fellowship of the Woodlands to heal my heart, to help me know I could lead, to help me know I could preach. And it was pretty incredible what he did during those times.
Can you talk us through that a little bit more? Because that's where a lot of us are. I wrote a whole book about it. What was the process that happened in you to turn your heart back to believing you could do something greater?
I think a big part of it, Dale, was just, going ahead and deciding I'm going to serve and use my gifts to the best of my ability there at Fellowship of the Woodlands. What
position were you in there? What were you doing there for them?
I started out as the pastor of ministry. So I was over all the ministries of the church and was on the executive team with Kerry. So I would preach for him when he was gone. I mean, we had a team that did, but I would preach periodically or do a Wednesday night service when we had those. So I just went into it full tilt, and we saw great success. I love being with the leaders that we had, and enlisted a bunch more leaders. I think it was just the process of going through some years and Kerry giving me an opportunity to preach, and people always responded incredibly well to that. And it was a good church where the people were very positive and helpful. And I think, just all the things that we went through, just being a part of that and having so many different people affirm you and what you're doing, really helped the healing process along, and knowing that your efforts weren't in vain, I mean, because we saw tremendous growth in ministries, had a great response to when I would preach. And then I was over major activities of the church, and those were successful. So I guess, God just allowed me to be in a place for a while where I could use my gifts and my abilities well, and see the blessing from that. Now, that it didn't start immediately, but
Yeah.
it did come.
I want you to speak to something. So
Okay.
you were put in this position where you were with a great leader who actually reached out to you, who believed in you,
Yeah.
who got your back. There are a lot of folks listening right now that are in that same boat you were in, but they don't have that carry. They don't have that leader.
Yeah.
If you were going through what, knowing now on this side of it, what you went
Yeah.
through then, and if you were one of these folks listening right now that doesn't have someone like that, what would you tell them to do to help get kind of healthy again, if we could say it that way?
Well, one of the things that is mentioned in the book that's a key to me is emotional health.
Okay.
And even after I came here to lead Grace, I started going to a counselor, a pastor who's a counselor. It's an incredible guy named Ed Lamance. Even before I did that, I spent a week in Colorado at a place called the Blessing Ranch with Dr. John Walker.
Heard about it.
And spending that, he really helps pastors. That was the beginning of me, I think, beginning to identify just some of my own insecurities, and realizing who I already knew my identity in Christ, but he helped me go further with that and really understand that. And then that counseling helped tremendously. I think the other thing was having some guys like in a network, like 95 Network or whatever, that I could talk to, and get help. But I think Peter Scazzaro, maybe that's the name. Anyhow, he wrote the Spiritually Healthy Church, which was very helpful to me. I had to deal with some of my issues, and one was lack of trust, because I'd been hurt in the church on more than one occasion.
And you've been hurt by your friends.
Yes. Yeah, pretty deeply.
Yeah.
And so my insecurities play into that. And then the enemy uses fear, with that. And I just had to realize how to overcome that. Now, Ed Lamance was the one that really helped me overcome the spiritual battles. It's a spiritual battle.
Sure.
It's where the enemy loves to attack us and make us feel like we don't have any value, or what's wrong with us, or, I can't be used. And even though I've been in this for years and years and years, certain things happen. And you mentioned some friends. Yeah, I had a group of friends who left Grace, and it really hurt. It rocked me. And they were people I thought we'd be friends with the rest of our lives. And what hurt, I guess, the most in that was they never would talk. I tried to contact them. I tried to talk to them. What did I do? What did we do? Let me ask for forgiveness. Or they wouldn't even talk. They never have, and they haven't.
Wow.
Now, Ed helped me pray through that, recognize the spiritual attacks in that. And it took about probably 3 months of seeing him and praying in some specific ways, to where I got to the point where I felt good about it. Not to say that the enemy didn't attack there again, because he did.
He does. Yeah.
But he really helped me get through it and recognize, hey, it's okay, and you're okay.
Was it natural to you before all this? Was it natural for you as a man, set aside being pastor, BJ, but just, was it natural to reach out for help? Is it natural for you to go for counseling, or was that something you had to just make yourself do?
No, it wasn't. In fact, when I went, I heard a pastor of a huge mega church, I won't mention his name, but at a conference I was at, saying that Dr. John Walker saved his ministry and his life. And I'd heard other people say they had counseling. People like Andy Stanley talks about going to a counselor, and other big leaders. And I just thought, well, maybe that's what I need, but I don't think anything's wrong with me. I'm okay. I don't need help. I can handle this.
Yeah.
But when I went and saw John Walker, man, it became real evident that I did need help, especially in the areas of trust.
Sure.
Trust in people. Because when you've been hurt a number of times by people that claim to be Christians, it's deep and it's painful.
It's scary, man, how mean some Christians can be.
They can be very mean.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I'm just agreeing with you because I was thinking about there was a mega pastor that I won't mention his name who really impressed me many years ago. I think I might have been in my 30s, and he talked about how he would go once a week and lay on the couch of a psychologist or psychiatrist, and I'm going, really? And I was like, oh, what's wrong with you? As I've gotten older, I'm going, nothing was wrong with him.
Nothing was wrong with him. I would love for young guys, especially, to realize. And one of the things we did here at Grace while I was still the lead pastor, as I began to get to know Ed Lamance, we brought him in and had him meet with all the pastors and the staff.
Good.
We had him come in and speak to our church. I just believe every guy needs emotional help because we've all been hurt. I tell you something else that really helped me tremendously is I'm a part of a group called Radical Mentoring, and it's for men. I got involved in it about 6 years ago. And one of the first things that you do in Radical Mentoring, once you establish your group, is you have a story retreat. And that's where, as a leader, if you're going to set the tone for the group, you have to be totally open and honest about your struggles and your failures. In fact, the first book you read in it is called Beau's Cafe, which is a really good book. It's a novel. Yeah. But to me, it pictured what the church should be, because what I found out, every one of those guys would tell you, and I could bring I've had multiple groups, they're all dealing with shame and guilt, all of them, over something, and every one of us struggle. And so the story retreat is just where you bare your soul. And I think when I did that with them about all my past and my struggles now and all that, they went, wow, somebody else struggles with the same thing I'm struggling with. And the cool thing about that group is you could come, you would be loved and experience grace, but we'd also speak truth into you. Don't leave you there, but help you move on. But it was a place where those guys, it was a place of refuge and grace and help, because I think most men struggle. And so I think, and with Ed, I go back to see him. It's not a one-time shot with me with him. I've gone back to see him periodically. And in fact, I'm fixing to go back again here pretty quick to deal with some other issues. But I think men by nature, we don't want to ask for help, or we don't know who to ask. And we all need it desperately.
Well, pastors specifically, I've said this for years, pastors, we put pressure on ourselves that Jesus doesn't. That's what my book was all about, was that, I thought he was mad at me because I hadn't built a mega church. Yeah. What I've discovered is, especially when you're a small church pastor, I used to look around when I was pastoring going, who do I go to?
Exactly.
I can't go to my board. I don't want to take and dump all this on my family. I can't trust anybody in my church. And at that time, I can't trust anybody outside my church. Other pastors will rat on you. Oh, yeah. So there wasn't 95 networks and counseling opportunities that there are today. And so for so long, and pastors have this thing about when we fail, when we make mistakes, we feel like it's just the end of the world more than other people. And it's just, we have a lot of false pretense about what it means to be a spiritual leader. And some of it we learn in seminary, and some of it we just, the expectations of our people. So I appreciate you diving into that a little bit, spend some time there. Talk about your marriage, your kids a little bit before we move into the book part.
I met my wife, Janet, when I was going to Angelo State University. And it was about, 2 years after I became a believer. So it was really cool. I was a part of the BSU at that time, because I met some guys that rode dirt bikes. And, back before I became a Christian, I thought all Christians were weird. I mean, they were just weird. Yeah. And so I hadn't met any that I thought were pretty cool, but I met two guys out doing boondocking on dirt bikes, where I did my stuff with a dirt bike. And one was her brother, and another was the head of the BSU at the school. And I thought, these guys are cool, I mean, and so I ended up getting involved they invited me, and I dropped out of college because I hadn't done well because of all the partying and all that stuff. I went back to college after I became a Christian. But when they invited me to go back, it was before I'd gone back they invited me to this Tuesday night deal. I went there. There were a lot of pretty girls and free food. You can't beat that combination.
That's what you're
as a man.
Looking for in college, bro.
You got it. So I started going to the BSU, and then I got back into college and kept going. And I met my wife, Janet, there, and we've been married. I'll get this wrong and say it wrong, but no, we've been married 46 years.
Congratulations.
And it's incredible. We've got an incredible marriage. Not that we haven't gone through ups and downs in our marriage, just working through who we are.
Dude, you've been in ministry. I get it.
Yeah. And she's been such a blessing in all these. It's really funny because she was a real homebody from West Texas. She grew up on a farm and ranch in West Texas. And she wasn't sure she wanted to marry somebody going into ministry. And she used to pray. It's really funny. She'd pray, God, please never put us in Dallas. Please never put us in Houston, and never take us out of Texas. So my first full-time job in ministry as a student was in North Dallas, of all places. The next place we went was Louisiana for 6 years. And then we spent 15 years in Houston. So, when Paradise came about, I'm not saying anything but thank you, Lord. That's it, So, but she's been on this whole journey with me. She's a kindergarten teacher, did that for 30 years and really invested. And she had her own ministry with the teachers at the school, which was great.
Cool.
I have 3 kids, Jeremy, Julie, and Josh, who are, they all love Jesus. They love his church, which I'm very grateful and thankful, for that. Jeremy is married and has one little girl. She's my only granddaughter, so she's spoiled rotten.
I bet she is.
And he's the community champion here at Grace Fellowship. So he's been here, I think 12, 13 years on staff. My middle daughter is Julie, and she's married to Chris Hurst. And Chris is the guy we transitioned to. He's the lead pastor here at Grace now, which is kind of an interesting deal.
Yeah.
And then my youngest son, they have 2 boys, Brock and Barrett. So I have 2 grandsons there. And then Josh, my youngest, married Hannah. They have 3 boys. So I've got 6 grandkids. And Josh is the principal at Paradise Elementary, but also very involved here at Grace. So, for the first time, I guess, in a long time, over the last 5 years or so, we've had them all close, which has been really nice.
Yeah. Our middle daughter moved to Montana a few years ago. And it's hard but we get to go to Montana twice a year. So that's kind of a good trade-off. We usually go
there is a good trade-off
and
there.
usually go at Christmas. And so that's been good. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a short break. And when we come back, I want us to dive into your book and just talk about where it came from. And I believe it's going to help some folks. So short break. We'll be right back.
Sounds good.
Back here with BJ Rutledge, and we're just talking through life together. Honestly, I'm just having a ball catching up with you.
It is fun, man. I am too.
Yeah, but I do want to take a moment. Your book is called Miracle in the Cow Pasture.
Yeah, exactly.
Talk about that, bro. How did this come about?
We really are a miracle out in the cow pasture. When I left Houston to come up here to help. This was a startup church to help with a startup church back in 2004. We were meeting in a high school in Bridgeport, Texas, which is about, 5-6 minutes down the road. And of course, we started looking for land as we immediately when we got here, we started seeing growth and seeing things happen that were incredible. God was just doing miracle after miracle. We'd been here 1 month and had a leap year baptism back in 2004 and baptized 28 new believers in that first 4 weeks. And that just continued. And I think God was showing us what he is able to do if we'll just step out and trust him. And God has just provided over and over and blessed. So anyhow, we needed to look for land even that early as a young church, and met a man named James Wood and his wife, who James has passed away now, but they were strong Christians. We met with them, shared our vision with them, and that we were looking for land. And I told the group when I came here, originally the small group that was starting out thought they needed about 4 acres. And I told them, no, we need 30 to 50 acres. And they thought I was nuts, 30 to 50. What are you going to do with that? So anyhow, James and Shirley had land here in Paradise, literally a cow pasture.
Where is Paradise, by the way? I meant to ask you earlier, as far as like Dallas.
Paradise is about 45 minutes west of Fort Worth.
Okay.
So if you come out Highway 114, which is a major highway that runs through the Metroplex, Dallas, Fort Worth, Grapevine area, come out about 45 minutes, you'll find, but it's a little bitty town. There's one light, one or 2 stores. There's not much here. But but we found the land, and he offered us 30 acres on 114 just outside of Paradise. And so we bought that, and that's where we are. I mean, that's where we built buildings and done stuff. And we've just seen, I think over the years, as different people have come in for either conferences or seminars, or they've come in because we've invited them to come in and speak, or we've hosted something. I've had quite a few leaders tell me, you got to tell this story. You just got to tell this story. It's going to encourage people. And I started actually about 5 or 6 years ago, and then discovered that writing was hard.
It is.
And it takes a lot of time.
And you talk about dealing with issues that require counseling.
Oh, yeah.
Write a book and find out what happens.
Oh, my goodness. Yes.
You relive everything.
So I did. And so, it just kept happening. And then we did a transition to a new lead pastor, which was something that I actually started 5 years before we did it with our board, saying, look, by the time we get to about 2022 or so, I'm very passionate, but I'm not going to have the emotional strength or the physical energy to take this church to the next level. So we need to find a young guy that can do this. And so we started doing that, and my role changed quite a bit, and I retired in February of 2022, but I'd already started then back on. I'd had a couple other people tell me, you've got to write this story. I believe that. And as I thought about it, I said, it would really be a good idea. And so I just spent time every day writing, and I went away to some places to spend a week writing and rethinking, and some of it was painful, like you said, and some of it was great. But that's it. And really, the whole story of grace is just one miracle of God after another. But I think I say, and it's, God took a group of ordinary people like me and chose to do something extraordinary as we just began to trust him and step out in faith. I told the original group here, look, we need to ask big, pray big, and believe big, or believe big, pray big, and ask big. So that's what we've done. And, the glory goes to God, because he has done so many things that, we never even dreamed would happen.
You're in Texas, and so everything's big in Texas anyway. It's just a fact.
I guess.
But I've been to Paradise, and it's like it's not a big town.
No.
So where do all these people come from?
They've been coming from multiple counties around us. There are a lot of small towns in Wise County. And I say small, they're not that small, but they're anywhere from 1,000 to 6,000 people. When we first moved, when we bought the land in Paradise and built the initial building that we built, Paradise was a town of 459 people. So it's small. Yeah. But, word just gets out. And as God is changing lives, people invited their friends. And so they're coming from a large number of small towns. It's a rural community. So, there's a lot of small communities around. Now, in the last couple of years, there's a lot of building going on around us now. So Paradise is not 459. In all the small towns around us, in Boyd, around Paradise, Decatur is growing. All these towns out here, I think people are moving from the Metroplex this direction. And we were hoping that would happen. I mean, in the original vision I felt like God gave me for the church was to establish a church that would be ready for the growth that we believed and hoped would come. And it's here now. It's growing. But originally, now it's just a small area. So I guess we reached people. I think we remember we had people coming from about 4 or 5 counties. And a lot of times they would come from a pretty good distance, and we would just encourage them, look, you need to find a church that's close to you. Yeah. We love you here. We are not saying don't be here, but for you to be able to connect and really get engaged, it's difficult when you live that far away. So, but that's what happened.
That's so amazing. That's just so amazing. So let me ask you this. You think back to it all, was there a moment when all of a sudden it just took off, or was it just continued steady growth?
For us, it's been continued steady growth. There's not been any years that, we had like just crazy growth. It's just been constant and steady, at least the 17 years, that I was here. When COVID hit, we had grown to the point of we were running about 1,800 on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And, but it just was just consistent, steady growth. And I think part of that was, we would do special events. We did those in order to draw big crowds. And we knew from that would facilitate people coming back.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried to do those with excellence. We didn't overdo it. We did several. We made Easter big. We made Christmas big. We started doing a huge July the 4th celebration that was free to the community.
Mm-hmm.
I think this year there were probably at least 6,000 plus people on our campus.
Wow.
And since it's free, people come from all over and they have a blast.
Mm-hmm.
We do a big fireworks show. We have food trucks and all kinds of stuff for kids to do. And what's interesting is we do that early July. We always have a large number of first-time guests that come back after that. But that also happened after Christmas. It also happened after Easter. And we would try to be very specific in doing things after those big events to where we would see some of those people come back. The other part of it, I think, were just the consistency group. Initially we were questioned by a lot of people. We weren't liked by a lot of people, by even some churches.
Why were you not liked?
Because we were growing.
Okay.
And
nothing specific, just the fact you were growing.
Well, there were, a lot of the original leaders came out of one particular church.
Gotcha.
And I talk about that in the book. It's a whole story about, which we've all heard, where they had a pastor they were reaching people and growing, and he was making some changes, and some of the leadership in the church didn't like the changes. He ended up being fired. And so a group of them really felt like, God's not going to honor this. And we really want a church where people can come and the Holy Spirit can be free to move. And we're not trying to control things. We had a lady in the church. Her name was Rosie Vaught. She had prayed for every day for 50 years for a church like this to be born in Wise County.
Wow.
And she was one of our members. She died just 4 months short of her 100th birthday.
Wow.
She was one of my prayer warriors and just an incredible lady. But she told me early on, I just didn't believe God would honor what happened there. And so she had prayed, and she was a part of what we know. And I don't know the whole story of really what happened because I wasn't a part of it.
Sure.
But I think that church probably initially didn't like us because they lost some people that would start this new church.
Sure.
Other than that, it was kind of like we were called the Boogity Boogity Church, the Walnut Church, the circus come to town.
Were you really that crazy though?
We did a lot of different things.
So what did you do?
I remember one of the first Easters, even while we were still in Bridgeport, we tried to make every service very engaging, and we wanted to be the friendliest church anybody had ever been to. So that was greeters, parking lot people,
Sure.
What we did. But we also tried to do things we had very limited stuff.
Yes.
Okay. We didn't have much equipment or anything when we first started. We didn't have any money. And, but we tried to do a few things with excellence rather than a whole lot of things that weren't. But one of the first Easter, it wasn't the first Easter, but it was the second Easter that we were there. We brought in a guy named Chad Brannon, and he was Xander on some major soap opera. And he had won two Emmys like this, or one. I think he'd won two.
Yeah.
So, we publicized it. He was a bad guy on this soap opera.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I don't watch soap operas. I didn't know anything about that. But one of my friends at Fellowship of the Woodlands, one of the guys on staff, had called me and told me about this guy. And what happened with Chad was he got saved. Yeah. Before he won his second Emmy. And his story was incredible. And so we brought him in and had him, we did our normal stuff, and I shared just a little bit. We did an interview with him and let him share his story, and people were saved, and it was great. But we got bad mouth because we brought in a soap opera dude, they didn't know anything about him. They just wanted to bad mouth us.
Yeah. That always happens.
So, but yeah, we've done a lot crazier than that since we've been here, but that was just early on. we just tried to do things that were great. One of the biggest things that we did, Dale, though, was, and it is in the book, is we determined from the very beginning that we wanted to be for our communities.
Yeah.
And we're going to be heavily engaged in the community and help in any way that we can. We wanted people to know that we cared about them, whether they came here or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we were going to be engaged in helping in anything that we could do. And part of the reason for that was whenever they hit a difficult time in their life, whether they say they believe in God or not, a lot of people still pray,
mm-hmm.
or they'll reach out to God even if they've never prayed.
Mm-hmm.
And when they thought about God, or thought about how do I get to know what I need to do, we hope that they would think about us. And that's not a proud thing. It's just, we hope that if they made that connection, they would think, well, that's a church that does stuff in the community. And maybe I could go there and find some answers. And so we hope that would happen, and it has. So we were very much involved in just doing anything we could for the communities. I want to take a step back too and mention this, because I forgot to say this a while ago. When we came here, we had no idea if this was going to take off or not, or we had no guarantees of anything.
You never do.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
And it wasn't about growing, this some big church or something. But when I was a singles pastor, I was at Champion Forest Baptist Church in Houston. We went through, this is many years ago, we went through Experiencing God.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd had a situation prior to that where a former pastor had recommended me to become a pastor at a church. And they came in and talked to me, and I was interested to some degree. But as we talked through that, they got very interested in me, but I didn't think their location was where I wanted to be, and the church wasn't a big church.
Mm-hmm.
And so, honest truth is, I didn't even pray about it, really. I mean, kind of gave it, lip service.
Yeah, lip service. And
just told them, I just don't think God is in this. Well, I didn't know if God was in it or not. And I hate telling that, it hurts to think about it, because I didn't honestly consider what God might want to do there. But right after that, we went through Experiencing God, and God taught me a great lesson. And, just that you need to be open to whatever I'm doing. It's not the location and it's not the size. Mm-hmm. Just be open to whatever I'm doing and partner with me. And I think that was a key thing, that when this came up, this opportunity, that was one of those things that was deep within me that said, okay, God, whatever you want, that's what we'll do. Mm-hmm. And so that's another part of, how we ended up here.
I think one of the things I communicate when we do our conferences to pastors is, Jesus is not in heaven with his arms folded going, I don't want to bless those people.
No,
I don't want to reach Jesus died for everyone. Yeah. And I think that what's limiting him moving in so many places isn't him, it's us. It's not having any faith. It's not believing. And I remember one of the last things he said before he goes to the cross was, when the Son of Man returns to the earth, will I really find faith in the earth?
Yeah.
And I think in America, if we're honest, there's more of what you just said earlier. I didn't really pray about it. I just, this wasn't, I think that's probably resonates with us more than those who just really superly dig into, his presence and what he's called us to do, and just being available. So I do want to ask you this. So you were there 18 years. The church is like 20 years old now, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Just celebrated 20 years.
Okay. So, and I'm going to ask you these in backwards so we can end on the high note.
Okay.
What was as you look back, what was your lowest low? And then after that, I want to go, what's your highest high?
Okay.
But when you look back, and I know there's a lot of low lows.
Yeah. I think one of the lowest lows was when that group of friends that I was really close to left.
Yeah.
It really ripped my heart out.
And you didn't see it coming?
No. I kind of had an idea, because they'd start getting very sporadic, like in attendance and different things. And they were all a part of a life group. And, I get it, but it just didn't make any sense to me. And the fact that they would not talk with me about it, at least, tell me what's going on with you, and why. I mean, I went to a couple of them trying to get them to talk. They wouldn't. One of them did tell me when I asked, I did meet with one of the guys, and I said, well, what's the deal? Why? He said, there is no why. And I thought, that can't be true.
Yeah.
So it was just very, very painful. And that took me some time to get over.
You're still not over it.
Not completely.
Yeah.
I love those
get it.
guys and would love to have the friendships with them, but that's been gone for a number of years. I mean, we're still very cordial when we see each other,
Sure.
and it's all good.
So did you find out from another point, someone else, did you ever find out anything that let you understand?
No.
And so there was really never closure to that.
No, never closure.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's where God gave me grace just to step through that and to find healing, and Ed Lamance through the counseling helped me with that tremendously.
Yeah.
There are other things that happened, but that's probably one of the more painful things.
Sure.
I think the second thing would be, we did start a satellite campus over in Alliance near Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lesson in humility and failure. We weren't ready.
Yeah.
And that impacted quite a few people, shutting it down did.
Yeah.
And I think in that's one of the I have not lost the currency of trust with these people hardly ever, but I think I lost a little bit of the currency of trust with that.
Yeah.
It built back, and it's fine. I mean, we did great after that, but that was a very difficult thing to do. I mean, It was just like that was probably one of the first, what I would call, I don't know if you can call it this, major failures that we felt like we experienced. And that's on my shoulders, I mean, I agreed to it, went with it. Our staff wanted to do it. Our campus pastor was all in, but
did you have a check in your spirit that maybe the timing was wrong and you just didn't say it? Or
yeah, I did.
Yeah.
In my spirit, I felt like, I'm not sure we're ready for this, but they were all pushing, and gung ho. I mean, when I say pushing, I was on it. I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
There was a check. Are we really ready to do this? I mean, it's a big expense, and but once we made the decision, I was all in.
Yeah.
And again, that rests on my shoulders, not anybody else.
Timing's always, I think, it's not that the idea was bad or that the need was wrong, but I think sometimes the timing gets off. And again, we've been in this era now, and I do think one of the greatest things that's happened to the large church is multi-site. I think multi-site is a very biblical concept. So I like that, but sometimes it's just it's about timing. One of the things that we do a Soul Care Essentials conference that we're doing with 95 Network now. And the very last point of the third session, we talk about your professional life, and we talk about that. One of our staff members had mentioned on a podcast that pastors never get to complete things.
Yeah.
And I grew up building houses. This particular member of our staff, he grew up building houses. And so, building a house, you go from, foundation to walls, to floor to walls and in roof, and you finish something. In ministry, you never get to complete anything. And I think about the hurt you experienced with those folks and how and it's not been sewed up. It's just, and that keeps you off balance emotionally, I think. Yeah. Have you seen that?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, that was one of the big deals. Even if I drive by where they worked or their office, where the enemy would really attack, and and I don't have time to go into all of that, but Ed really helped me praying through that whole thing. But yeah, it kept me off balance. And I would say after maybe 6 months or so, I was pretty good. And I was even good driving by where they were. But if I ran into them, in my mind, there was always that question, why'd you leave? I don't get it. Why won't you tell me?
Yeah.
And so, the friendship is still there, but it's not anywhere where it was. I mean, it's just like, we're just kind of cordial. So that was tough. You ask about greatest victories or greatest.
I wanted to transition from that to, okay, so that was like one of your most lowest lows. What's one of your highest highs?
I think there's been so many.
That's great. That's good.
I think one of the first ones was actually that first baptism.
Yeah,
it really was, because we started. I started on the first Sunday in February 2004, and the group of people that started praying and meeting to form the church, they started in June of 2003. But I came on February the 1st, And I told them, we need a baptism team. We need to do this, that. And they're going, what's a baptism team? And we did the baptism out in a pool at one of our members' homes. And man, we had to take down part of his fence, and there were people parked everywhere, and it was crazy. And that first month we saw 28 people come to know Christ and follow him in baptism. And I think God was giving us a picture of what to expect. He was building our faith if we would just trust him. And, I think I say this in the book, but you're talking about, pastors in small town. The issue is what we began to know and believe. And I think what God really put on my heart before I came here is that there are thousands of really good people around me, or hundreds of really good people around me, but many of them don't know Jesus.
Yes.
And I want you to tell them. There are a lot of religious people around you, but I want you to. So that was one of the first. Honestly, I think another one is what's going on right now.
Okay.
I'm still here. Janet and I are here at Grace. We're serving. The transition to Chris as the lead pastor was so good. And of course, after COVID and all that stuff, but man, we had to go to 4 services last week because the church is just booming and going. We've already baptized 136 people this year already. And Chris
we're recording this in August. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's awesome. In August. So Chris is doing a phenomenal job, and the staff is doing a phenomenal job. And so, one of my prayers, no matter where I've been, whether it was student ministry, singles, or pastoring or whatever, I always want the people that come behind me to do far more than I could ever think or dream. I want them to be successful. And I did what I felt like God wanted me to do to set the next guy up for success as best I could. But I think one of my greatest joys is just, man, I get to walk around in the atrium in the lobby now, and there are hundreds of families and young kids, and the children's ministries busting out the seams. The preschool ministry doesn't have room. And we've already gone into another building campaign because we're hurting. And, it's just, I think that's just incredibly exciting. One of my favorite things, I guess you put years and years and years of your life into it, and you want to see things continue and to do well. And we have been God has just been so faithful and good to continue to bless us, so he's done all kinds of things.
I remember hearing Pastor Willie George say this one time, and I thought of you when and it brought it back up. He said, when you're a kid, your most exciting time of the year is Christmas. There ain't nothing but Christmas, and you get all these presents, and when you're a kid, you get lots of presents because they don't cost a lot. Right. But as you get older, you become a teenager, then it's the iPhone or whatever the new technology, and you may just get one. And something about being a teenager, Christmas doesn't have quite the same pizzazz because you're only getting one or two things. Yeah. But then you become a parent. And once you become a parent, man, then you get to do it all over again. And then the excitement of Christmas is your kids getting stuff.
Yeah.
But there ain't nothing like being a grandparent.
No, there's nothing Christmas. Like being a grandparent.
That's where you are today in ministry. You walk around and you are Grandpa BJ to this whole church. And it's just an incredible thing, It's an incredible thing.
It is. And I'm full of joy.
Yeah.
Janet and I are all in until God tells us to do something else. I mean, we'll still be involved here regardless of what we do, but we love it. It's just joy.
Well, I love your story. I love you personally because you came through for me personally, and I didn't know you well, but you came through for me on our board at a really critical juncture. And you're part of the reason 95 Network's healthy today and doing what it's doing and having the impact it's having. So I'll always respect you for that.
I love that.
And so as we get to the end of the podcast, I always like to ask a question to kind of get to where you could relate to the listener. So if you're sitting down today and you're having coffee with one of our listeners today, and it may be a lead pastor of a small church, could be a staff member or even a board member who's like, I don't want my church to die. And they hear your story and they go, maybe today they're listening and thinking, well, if God could do that for BJ in Paradise, Texas, maybe he could do it for us. So if you're sitting down with them and you're having coffee and they're kind of discouraged or looking for advice, what would you tell them?
I think I'd probably tell them, don't give up. God wants to use you and can. And remember that there are hundreds of people around you that don't know Jesus, and that he put you here to reach those people. So, and I know every church is different. So some guys can't make changes because of the structure of the church.
Politics.
But if you can make some changes, you need to be very careful and cautious and wise and talk to the influencers in your church before you ever do anything crazy. But if you can make a few changes to become a little bit more, relevant to the culture where we are now, I think that's what I talk about in the book. That's what missionaries are trained to do. They learn the language and the customs of the people. They don't try to make the people become like them or like an American version of Christianity. I think most churches started out wanting to fulfill the Great Commission, and we need to be very missional. But that means our methods, we just need to look at them and think through, what could we do to make a difference. And then a big thing for me, again, as I said, is love your community. It's got to be real. Can't be just words. You got to love the people in your community, no matter who they are or what they've done. So, I would encourage them to do that. If they feel like they can't where they are, maybe they need to pray about God releasing them to go somewhere where they can. But that's a hard thing to do. But if I grew up in Baptist churches, so I can't talk about a lot of, even though my family was Assembly of God and Baptist and some Methodist, but I grew up primarily in Baptist churches and served in them. And in a lot of churches, there's a power structure, and they don't want to give up their power. And so if you cross them, you could be in trouble. So I just say to those guys, you got to be wise and careful, and talk to the right people about making changes. But for me, I guess, Dale, I think life is just too short to stay, just to stay somewhere because it's safe, maybe, I guess. And, I would at least encourage them, if you don't think you can make some changes where y'all can actually fulfill the Great Commission and the Great Commandment, is maybe start praying about, God, is there something else you want to do with me? I don't want to just go through the motions of church.
Absolutely.
So, and I would encourage them to find somebody they could talk to that would, outside that would help them.
You're leading into the way I'm going to close this podcast. Okay. So I know with all my heart that BJ would love to help you if you're listening right now.
Absolutely.
One of the words we don't use, especially in the circles that he's been in, but this is something I know God's doing, is God is reestablishing the apostolic. And that's basically raising up father figures for the younger pastors to have. And you are one of those people. Yeah. You just have that father's heart. It's come through the whole podcast. So I'm encouraging you as a listener. I'm going to have his email in here in the show notes. If you need to talk to BJ, he would love to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Reach out to him and let him pour into you, because he's being very transparent about, and he will do this. He'll tell you about all the things he did wrong. And my thing is, why in the world would you want to go repeat the same things if somebody like Dale or BJ can tell you, well, hey, don't go down that road. Yeah, so I want to encourage you. I want to make BJ available to you. His book is called Miracle in the Cow Pasture. I'll have a link to in the show notes of how you can get the book. But most of all, you need people like BJ in your life, because BJ's had people like BJ in his life that helped him get here. So have I. And God has never called us to do it alone. Man, thank you so much for your time, for pouring into us, and for your transparency and your heart for the church, your love for Jesus, your love for people, and for being my friend. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate you too, Dale. So, and it's been great to be with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the 95 Podcast. We look forward to sharing another episode with you next week. In the meantime, visit our website at 95network.org. The website is loaded with great resources created for small and mid-sized church leaders. Until next time, have a great week.